Welcome back. Professor Okey Ikechukwu joins us now. He is the Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. My pleasure.
Well, you know, the thing about all of this is no matter how lofty the plans are from government, at the end of the day, it is the results and how people, the impact is what will be paramount. And if you could just backtrack for a bit, I know that, yes, this government is going ahead and addressed taking subsidy off headlong, but the statements came through from Garba, Shehu, spokesperson of the former president, Buhari, about why they left that petrol subsidy. And it raised questions concerning probably some of the intention behind their policies. So perhaps you could just give us some sort of background, if you will, on what you make of that statement as it concerns perhaps then delving into some of the policies that this government has taken so far.
Well, for me, at least at the level of professional public communication, I would have been reluctant to make that kind of statement as a media aide of a former president, because he brings up issues. It would suggest, and it does suggest, that my boss was more interested in if you like, electoral victory. In other words, that he's the kind of person who will see a necessary policy decision and hold it back in order to gain something. And I also doubt that it was a conscious decision because of the current president. Because let's look at the variables. While the elections were on, President Tinubu lamented, at least we had it on TV, about those in Asoro working against him. We also heard that the Naira redesign was targeted against his candidacy. And a lot of people from within the party who were his boys, quote and unquote, came out to contest against him. And yet, at some point, the view was very strong that the president himself didn't give it endorsement, particularly with his reaction to the Naira redesign. So that Tinubu is, in my view, somebody who emerged in spite of the forces within the APC and outside the APC. So now suddenly turn around and say that the single factor of not reducing fuel subsidies was done deliberately to ensure that he won. If any one of the other measures, sabotage measures put in place had worked, he wouldn't have been president. So I don't know the value of that. And let's also backtrack further and even ask the question, was the trajectory of the Buhari government entirely surprising? Not for me. If you go back to, he contested several times, but by 2014, there was this interview about what he will do about security. And he said once he won, he will meet with former service chiefs, highly retired and highly rated generals to, determine the problem and find a solution. I remember I wrote about it in the paper because that's an indication that there's no template. That's number one. Number two, you must understand his reflexes as a leader. As military president, remember essential commodities? Now, this is a man who can play a flawless custodian role if you give him something to do. But development economics is not about ration giving. So essential commodities, who did you consult to confirm that what Nigerians need is milk? What was your 3 items? And it was being distributed. That's the business of the federal government in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Production was not on the line. It's not that you're even saying, okay, let's now get milk factories. That wasn't happening. So that ration sharing thing, you see replicated in the 8 years, culminating in the Ministry for Humanitarian Affairs. So production, creating wealth, no, borrow and give, just feeding. Now, at the level of political decision-making and frontal leadership, that's the only regime you can substantively say that is described in dual terms. Buhari Garba regime. You can say Murtala Obasanjo because Murtala was killed. So the tendency to also, if you like, outsource leadership, to have greater visibility out of himself. Look at, if you really want to describe his term, before the demise of Kyari, it was a Buhari-Kyari presidency. So you see that but we are seeing a difference. Today, you know that there's a president who is the one taking decisions, and they're coming in quick succession. Of course, the concern is the impact, but I thought we should look at that. So anybody who understood his trajectory and orientation as a leader will have known that we are likely to end up with much of what we saw in the last 8 years in appointments. Also, as head of PTF, the same thing, the tendency to outsource authority. So I'm not sure this statement by my good friend Garba is very helpful. To begin with, I didn't think it was necessary.
Well, I'm looking at the policies now and whether we're back to, discussing what model Nigeria wants to go with. What economic model we really want to follow, whether we're with the neoliberalist, whether we're going to be a socialist, whether we're a mix of both. It's very uncertain because it does look like we want to go with the markets, but it does also appear that the consequences of that on our people, is grave. The consequences or it's not going to be without consequences, let me put it that way. In your own opinion, do you think that we've had a sufficient conversation on what economic model Nigeria truly wants to adopt?
I think we've had too much conversation on the model, and it's usually at the academic level. Among people who debate, who formulate policies, who will come on TV and tell you, okay, the medium-term economic framework, all of this, the exchange rate, the inflation is double-digit. We're all talking to ourselves as members of the elite because all this grammar in Abuja and state capitals doesn't affect anything. You're talking about whether we'll go with the market. Do you go with the market when you have nothing to put in the market? That's part of the question to worry about. So in substantive terms, you have political models, you have economic models. It's impossible, for instance, to say we go socialist unless somebody carries out a coup and then begins to turn things around. The major issue on the table is that we have a consumption-driven elite that mistakes expenditure for investment in either human capital development or national development or economic development. To that extent, and let's be realistic about it, and let's look at, Now, UNPADEC was set up, how many? Probably over 30 years ago. Oil mineral producing to develop the Niger Delta area.
It's since evolved to the
NDDC. That's what I'm moving up to. Now, there's NDDC. Now, the effort to develop the Niger Delta is probably 40 years on, right? There's no development. It has the highest volume of unexecuted contracts in trillions. What does it exist to do? So that is one.
So why do you think that's the case, though?
Sorry?
Why do you think that is the case?
Why the problem is there? To begin with, the concept of development is totally misunderstood and distorted. If I live in a riverine area and you come there, you carry out a project, give us a town hall, build a road, how many people have cars there? You want to give us electricity, you didn't know you should use underwater cable, you're looking for poles and then to erect concrete on it. And with all that expenditure, development, if you say my orange has developed, what it means is that it doesn't mean it has become mango. The leaves have grown, it's developed flowers and produce oranges. Now you come to a riverine community where I can no longer fish because of pollution. Instead of you thinking of water reticulation and creating pond, which is very possible, if you like 1 mile big, you're giving me things that cannot work in that place. And the people are also misled into accepting it. So the point I'm making in this connection being that we are talking about models and debating models, whereas the question to ask is, what can we do about environment A? The man in the Northeast, there's a lot of expenditure now, Northeast Development Commission. Check the figure. Is the Northeast being developed? Procurement and distribution of mosquito net, food and all of that, is that development? Development is at the Northeast from where we get a lot of wheat, sugar cane, many things. We'll return to that. But because people have moved and they're in refugee camps and all kinds of places, re-desertification has taken over the place. So if those people are going to resettle, there has to be some new effort to rescue the soil and regain it. Then you look at agriculture, and this is a point I've made repeatedly. We want more food, but you need water to get food. Now, Ministry of Agriculture, or those who are doing farming at whatever level, you build dam to get more water. As you build dam, the water going downstream reduces, the economy is there die out, the young men begin to steal. So you find that Ministry of Environment, Water Resources and Agriculture, the synergy that should be guided by an overall perception of the ecology of the nation across board is not in place. So we can debate economic models. How much have we spent, for instance, in the last 20 years of democracy? And after that expenditure, the road between Abuja and Kaduna is still bad. Less than 2 hours drive. Between Abuja and Lokoja, Okene, Makodi. So national development cannot occur where the physical infrastructure for national cohesion doesn't exist, when the economic policies is elite-driven, when the leaders travel mostly by private jet and mistake expenditure for investment, when education, which is the factory for producing human capital, a governor goes, builds new schools, launches them, he hasn't employed a new teacher, is a procurement contract for colleagues. And I have examples I can give on the matter.
So about this fuel subsidy removal, would you say that policy is also elite-driven?
It is long overdue. It's one of the most fantastic decisions any government should make. It should have been made more than 10 years ago. So
what about the current impact right now?
There will always be an impact. Look, and let's break it down again. Here in Abuja, we buy fuel at the official price. You leave Abuja to Suleja, that's about 1 hour drive. You get it to some areas, but as you move further into Suleja, it's no longer at the official price. You're driving from here to Katsina. In which place, except you get to state capitals, and only parts of state capitals, that's where you get at official price. This is the federal capital. You leave Lagos, official price in Lagos, you get to Ibadan. Very busy metropolitan city, you also get, but as you go further, or you're under absent, the southeast, there's never been official price, and there's not been for about 15 years. So what point am I making? You're spending billions every week to make sure the man out there gets fuel at a subsidized rate. I pocket that subsidy, and the man is not getting the fuel.
So, concerning pocketing that subsidy, and part of the reasons why they've given that this is no longer sustainable is certain people pocketing it, they're smuggling it to neighboring countries.
And exaggerations about the quantity.
So the question then is, isn't that an inefficiency or corruption problem as opposed to the subsidy not achieving the aim that it was set out for? Because are they telling us that they can't, because right now we don't have information, we haven't even heard if they've arrested any such person who are these people who are guilty of this. So what about those who are doing the smuggling themselves? Are they also invisible? Are they spirits? No. So if they took away the subsidy because of those reasons, what's the assurance that, look, these persons won't just move to another sector and continue, since we don't have that structure to deal with corruption?
No, you see, a thief is not trying to, he's not putting his energies into what to do in order to go to heaven. He's planning to steal. So now they are the people moving the fuel. We are subsidizing Cameroon, Benin Republic, nearly the whole of West Africa because they move it there. The moment this thing was removed, the price of fuel went up in Cameroon. So now, you are not talking about them stopping it. If it's at a regular market price that applies everywhere, there's nowhere to smuggle it to. That's number one. Number two, the quantities are not correct because what is subsidized is far beyond what we, Nigerians, are consuming. Thirdly, and I'll come to the question of impact, thirdly, you find that, like, your worry is, look, why can't it be stopped? Now, when the security man at your gate is the one letting in thieves, you're in trouble. The institutions of state that are supposed to prevent smuggling, from what we hear, and in some confirmed cases, all those who are managing those places have their own tankers also on the smuggling route. And that's a fact. It's something all the big boys are doing. That's why there are no arrests. Now, withdrawing it, the question then is, what do you do about the people? My salary hasn't changed. Now, transport has doubled. Not only has transport doubled, food prices, everything I need to do to be alive, price has increased. And my salary hasn't. What do I do? And government is talking about palliatives. And you remember there's the $88 million the Buhari regime secured for...
800 million.
800 million, yes. For the distant palliatives. And the government has already told us that in just 1 week, 1 month of withdrawal of subsidy, it has saved 400 billion.
And sorry, I've said they need to publish what they've done with that.
Not do what, who told them to do? They should first of all tell us where the money is. There you go. And why exercise discretion? Look, now, I pay school fees as a father living in Oshobo. I pay tax as an owner of SME. And you say, okay, no school fees for this year because the money recovered from the subsidy withdrawal will now be deployed to set off the cost or whatever is the same, and the figures can be made. How many students? If school fees are withdrawn for 1 year, right? What the expendable income of a father in Oshobo like me will increase. If you tweak taxes, the SMEs, the manufacturing sector will survive, etc. Because the real offensive thing about palliatives and financial backup is that the infrastructure for administering it is frightfully outrageous. You set up a fantastic office. We all have our private, SUVs. We are driving around, alleviating poverty in order to go and give people 200 naira, 20,000 naira. And we remember that during the COVID, we performed the miracle of feeding Nigerian children with 254 billion while they were in their parents' houses. Yeah. So who says witchcraft doesn't work in government?
So those are some of the... Well, let's go to our colleagues in Lagos. Go ahead, guys.
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. Well, Prof, still staying on that topic of, the issues you've raised in the energy sector. There are a number of people who have not forgotten the issues around oil theft. It is still quite a prominent one as far as they are concerned. But, going by, some of the things that you've said and the need to take proactive action, the Bank of America recently put out some kind of statements to corroborate a thing or two about that. They said that with the current momentum, the Tinubu administration, with the current momentum, Tinubu's next big move should be to reduce oil theft by reforming the security sector and involving host communities near the pipelines. You're not unaware of the brickbats about, who is stealing what as far as oil is concerned in this country. Do you agree with the Bank of America in this regard that the next big move for the president would be to work assiduously at reducing oil theft to the barest minimum? And then how do you factor in that brickbats between some interested parties in the oil theft saga?
Well, first of all, I'll start from yes, it's a good idea. That's one thing, because if you're farming and your farm products are being taken by others and they're being sold in the market, you're getting poorer. So you just have a farm but no income. It's a good suggestion. It doesn't even have to be a suggestion. And it's something I believe the government itself is aware and thinking of what to do. There are crises at two distinct levels and probably a third. Now, at the level of involving the host communities, my question is, have the host communities been on the moon all this while? Have they not been there and this is going on? Are they not participants and beneficiaries? Do they not have reason even to be participants and beneficiaries, given that it's the bunkerers or oil thieves that are those through whom they make any money at all? If you're living in a place where hear nothing about the state government except occasionally when big men drive around, your representative has no constituency office, you have no electricity. When you catch your fish, if you don't go quickly to the town to sell it off, the more urban areas, it will decay, so you don't have power to service it. And then there are people who come around the community and who give you money that you wouldn't make in 2 weeks. You work with them because the state has retreated from you. So the business of reintegrating the Nigerians in that part into a sense of citizenship, into a sense of part ownership of the Nigerian state, is something that is a task on its own. Beyond that, in some of those communities also, there's a perception among the less visible and less prominent people that their big men are sorted out by government, and there appears to be some indication confirming that. So there's also a disconnect between the elite at that level and the masses at that level. And so even when you've spoken to the elite, keep these boys down, because the thing appears not to be trickling down to them, the boys themselves acquire a life of their own. If, for instance, you think of the restlessness we've had in that place that threw up people like Dokubo and the rest of it, if the elite were able to control the youth, those things wouldn't have come about. So that's at that level of local community. So his preachment will not do anything.
Well, so
yes,
then,
we are
Prof,
told man shall not live by bread alone.
My apologies. Do you have any confidence at all, any hope in whatever way, manner, shape, or form, that anything will come out of a probe of the oil theft regime, if we can say it that way, that some people have been advocating over time. That government should probe oil theft and the people involved. Do you see anything coming out of whatever kind of probe of that kind of thing?
Carried out. Yeah, it's possible. It depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it. To begin with, don't forget that many of those you would want to use for the probe themselves need to be probed. Number two, it depends on how the leader, how far he's prepared to travel on the road he has chosen. Number three, making this happen then means you're going to have at least 3 decades of material to deal with, and in the process of that, you're going to find that some of the human pillars holding many aspects of our national life will need to be shaken. So the question is, are you ready to shake it? If your answer is yes, I'm ready to shake it, are you ready for the fallout? If you say yes, you're ready for the fallout, then open fire. So it is possible to achieve results, and this is not something that is without precedent. If you look at when first Buhari came as military head of state, you must give him an idea. They said, no, this our country can't go on like this. People, at the point they took over, people we thought were untouchable, were arrested, all kinds of things were going on. Yes, issues later arose about 53 suitcases, but there was a perception of a resolve not to care about who you are, provided dealing with you will give us a better nation. The question at the moment is whether that can happen. There are concerns that some of the actors, both in the ruling party and in the wider elite network, traditional rulers, heads of corporate Nigeria, are likely to be in the line of fire. And there are also the concern that, okay, the current president is also their friend. But you see, you have what you call radical self-redefinition. That can happen. So to the extent that that can happen at all, I'm confident that if there's a decision to go all the way, taking out whatever needs to be taken out, it is feasible, but that's in principle. In practice, if you're ready for the power politics of it, that means a renegotiation of interests. I know that A, B, C, and D are going to be affected. I call them and say, listen, this needs to happen. You're going to take some beating in your level of... it's leadership and power politics can always get negotiated. But anybody who wants to leave a legacy of a new Nigeria really has a duty not to probe as a gesture. Oh, he's probing it so that we'll keep the record. No, he should transform the sector. So we want to see immediate term results even while the probe is going on.
Let me just comment. It's very interesting what you're painting, and it looks like from what we have seen that might be an option for this government. But a lot of Nigerians will still want to see people hung in that sense. They want to see names. They want to identify these people as the ones who are responsible for pilfering the commonwealth of the nation. But you talked about the consequence of the policies that have been made. And I'd like you to just speak to that as we wind down. A lot of people, I don't know if you've seen that term, renewed shege. That's how a lot of people are, terming what they're going through right now. But it's quite ironic because it would seem that a lot of people agree that one subsidy should be removed, something should be done about the foreign exchange. But the reality is quite different. So for a lot of people, in fact, opposition has also taken that up, to reiterate that term. The Nigerians have seen 30 days of shege. I mean, how then should Nigerians interpret what is going on? Because they look at their disposable income, and indeed, it might be shege to them.
Well, the first thing to note is that we must make a distinction between opinion and knowledge. If you have malaria and you're familiar with chloroquine, nobody will tell you it's not something you will allow near your mouth under any circumstance. But because you have malaria, you swallow it. You even thank the person who gave it to you. If somebody asks your opinion, how do you feel about this thing? It's terrible. But your knowledge that is good for you makes you to keep quiet while swallowing it and saying waka to the doctor behind his back. But the point is this. Are many of the decisions he has taken now correct? My view, as economic decisions, my answer is yes. Are some of them likely to lead to positive transformation? My answer is yes. Do they have consequences? My answer is yes. Positive, yes. Are there some of them that may be questionable, in which the opposition is justified in saying we don't like this? The answer is yes. This is leadership, this is power politics, this is national development, this is citizenship survival. If Tinubu's decisions in the last 4 weeks are perfect, then he should be removed as president. That means he's not human. It is only in the process of play that you can fall down and get the ball again. So, yes, renewed Shege because there's inconvenience, but the truth of the matter is that, quite frankly, what did we expect? That you swear him in, and first thing the next day, you have heaven in your hands? In a country like this, where a lot of things are wrong, where practically nothing is working, so let's make a distinction in this matter. Saying that some of the decisions are correct is not the same thing as saying, oh, I agree with him, I support him, I am a Tinubu person. On the contrary, it's about the nation. So the decisions, some of them will take time to mature into positives. Now, the opposition has a duty to continue to pick on the government because it is by knocking it on all sides that it will remain on the straight track. So jobs are defined in these matters. Opposition is not the same thing as hatred or attack or wickedness or whatever. All of them are concerned, like all of us, about the nation. So concerning decisions taken so far, people should do more of deep reflection. Do you expect, for instance, that immediately unify the exchange rate, those who have been benefiting from it will go to sleep? They will think of other ways to subvert it and so create confusion. So it will take some weeks or probably months before the balance of forces, or if you like, the balance of strategic terrors neutralize each other. Then in the case of fuel subsidy, yes, the thing is, I think Edo State moved to 3 days a week. All of it. Supposing, for instance, Edo State now says, okay, move it to 3 days a week, and then discover that in 3 days we are doing actually everything we need to do in government. And then, and go further to a policy of 3 working days, the other 2 days go to your farm, etc. It will happen. Things happen.
Well, that will be the day, but that's not happened yet.
No, of course. You expect it to happen immediately?
We know 2 states that tried that. Imo State did so under the government of Governor Okorocha.
Yes.
And Kaduna State also had that. They had, I think, Fridays. They were supposed to go to their farms. It would be interesting if there was any impact as a result.
What impact? They were not going to any farm.
Exactly.
In the case of Kaduna, if you go there, they kill you. In the case of Okorocha, it was more of a joke than a serious project. So those that... No, I'm not making a recommendation. I'm pointing out the sort of things that could lead to new thinking in how to manage the environment.
But the challenge about this is it appeared it was knee-jerk. Those plans were not in place to ensure that how many of them even have those farms in the first place.
Which farm do you have in Benin? So, no. See the exciting thing about this. If I step out of here and it's raining, I don't have an umbrella. That's how the real world is. Everyday life is full of ambush. So you must also know that that is the substance of life. And then as leader, even as you're ambushing, you're thinking of buffers.
Yeah, but in this case, people were thought, as we wind down on this, that this plan should have been in place way before now.
I agree.
And contrary to what they said, that it was an elitist, they were the ones benefiting, the poor people can't buy the petrol now.
See, I agree with you, but see where I disagree. If the bulk of the fuel the poor man buys is not at official rate, and we're not talking about those of us living in state capitals, they are not benefiting. What is the concern now is that the consequences is hitting across board, and still not hitting the big man because I can still afford it at the big price, at that price. Now, the concern about what should have been done before the announcement, assuming, for instance, cushions were in place before this, then that would be it. I agree with all of that, but it's a decision that's already been taken. And what one would know, you will now see they say they will want to go and buy mass transit buses. Again, is a procurement contract. Interventions must target what will increase the expendable income of the common man.
It would be good to see what template.
Tariff shouldn't go up. If you say tariff go and give the electricity companies the money. Keep it where it is because you're forcing me to pay more. Certain things under control of government shouldn't go up. Then you're talking serious engagement.
So perhaps another day to engage that principle of subsidy. Should we talk about removing subsidy across board? Because in some other claims, of course, you have to subsidize because if you don't, you just might be ready for some challenge to handle. And then food availability, transports, key things in sectors of economies or countries that they cannot afford to play with. How are we approaching all of those? Well, those are matters that we will be talking a lot more as we progress. And not forgetting, all right, look, we'll just anchor at this point. But Prof, just about when the engine is just cranking to get started, I know that feeling, but of course, we'll find a way to ensure that we keep these conversations on the burner. Professor Okey Ikechukwu is Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Fine, as always.
All right, we will be back in a moment. Stay with us.